Good morning. This presentation is going to be very short because we have a packed program, and we couldn't have a festival of preservation without our own local lead preservationist, and it is Joe Lauro, is the head of the Historic Film Archives, and Joe has been a supporter of the cinema from the very beginning, from we were trying to raise money and design what this institution was going to become. And it is with great pleasure that I call him here, Joe Lauro.
Thank you. Good morning, early afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. And I am delighted to be part of this amazing festival. I've seen some remarkable restorations this week, and I know all of you, because I recognize most of you anyway, have been at some of these screenings. My company in the industry is known as a stock footage library, but that's really not what we do, because my focus has always been on music on film, or on as it existed in early television shows, ephemera, home movies, American entertainment on film. And, you know, we're not selling sunsets over Miami for a television commercial. We don't do that. We're more of a historical archive. You know, there was some talk about orphan films, and I guess we're a large orphanage in Greenport, and we take in strays and we find some remarkable things. And that's really, I think, what keeps me going in all of this, is really the discovery of, you just never know what's going to turn up. And that really is a motivation that's kept me doing it for some 35 years. We don't really work with features that often, but we have lots and lots of early television, which also, by the way, especially the stuff shot on 2-inch video, is in tremendous danger of vanishing. And there's so much of it, and it's so much more fragile than even film. I would say that film in general is more durable than 2-inch magnetic tape, which we have a race with time. That's another story. One of the programs, one of the segments you're going to see was on a 2-inch video. But to move along, we have a bit of local history that I'm going to begin the program with. LTV, the local TV station, called me with some unknown 35 millimeter reel. I took it, inspected it. I realized right away it was a nitrate print, very old. And when we unspooled it and scanned it, we saw that it was a document of the 1915 East Hampton 4th of July Independence Day Parade. 6 minutes long. I took the liberty of adding a soundtrack. We had so much fun making it because, of course, it was a silent film. But it was in remarkably good shape. We cleaned it. We didn't have to do any restoration, which we don't really do anyway. We do more preservation. Restoration is a whole nother, game. We don't get grant money. We don't really have the funding to do that. But what we do is we get older material, we clean it, we properly preserve it, we put it in a vault that's climate controlled, we try to scan it. So we're basically the first step of restoration, and that's preservation in my eyes. So 1915 East Hampton, followed by an interesting part of a series that was called Showtime at the Apollo. It's really one of the first African-American variety shows. It actually is the first that still survives. Ethel Waters did a 1939 television variety show. There were only 200 TV sets in America, so I don't know if that even counts. Certainly doesn't exist. There was another one in 1950 that does not exist. So you're going to see excerpts from Showtime at the Apollo, and the host of it, I don't know if any of you were at the Nicholas Brothers program last night, but Willie Reed is actually the host, and he was the vaudeville partner of Willie Bryant is the host, and he was the vaudeville partner of Leonard Reed, who was very well represented in Bruce's presentation last night. In fact, during the course of this series, they performed together, and they had been partners in the 20s. It presents rhythm and blues, which is really a very unrepresented form of American music, kind of like jazz's baby sister, doesn't get the respect, but clearly was very popular in the 40s, and without rhythm and blues, there would not be rock and roll. So here are my two first segments. I'll be back to tell you about the next ones. Sarah, would you mind turning it up maybe 20%? I like music like right in your face. A little bit louder, please, especially what's coming up next. Anyway, the great thing about the Harlem shows, there were 12 half-hour shows. They exist in 35 millimeter. We have the fine grains, which is really one step away from the negative. So as you see, they look really, really pretty good. They're in really beautiful condition. And, you know, we have them, and we're in the process now of scanning them all and making sure they stick around for a while for us all. You know, it's live, and that's another great thing. Rhythm and blues was generally presented in these, you know, sort of schlocky feature films where they would have different acts and some thin plot. And it was always studio recordings with them lip syncing. So the beautiful thing about this is it is all live. Everyone from Count Basie to Big Joe Turner. And that was Ruth Brown, by the way, the gala was singing. So we're just delighted to have these programs in nice condition. Emily Rothschild she's actually a dear friend of mine. She started New Day Films, which was still exists. It's a cooperative film distribution production company focusing on social issues. She made some really wonderful and important films in the 70s and 80s. But when she was a student at NYU, a film student, she had a camera, a little Bolex, and she worked at the Fillmore East, which was really kind of the mecca of rock and roll. It was absolutely the best place to hear music in the late 60s, early 70s. It survived till about 1971. Everyone played at the Fillmore East. Emily worked for Joshua Light Show, which was the liquid light show that was there all the time. And whenever she had a thought that maybe something special was going to happen, she made sure she bought some film for her Bolex. And on some occasions, she was able to figure out a way to get the sound directly off the board. And no one was filming this stuff back then. It was that transition when video cameras were way too large and way too expensive, and film was just expensive and a big deal. So I'm giving you 3 excerpts from her amazing archive of Fillmore East material. I don't know the order. I don't remember the order we have them in. I think we have, yes, we're starting with New Year's Eve, 1969. Jimi Hendrix and his band of gypsies. Their one and only performance. Jimmy was gone before the next few years. And it's a record of the Fillmore East that night. After that, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, as they appeared at the Fillmore in their first tour. This was shot MOS, or silent, as they said. And what I did, and one of my staff members who works on this stuff with me, we found some bootlegged audio from the Fillmore, and we figured out what song they were playing, and we actually sunk it up the best we could to the picture that Emily had. It was a bit of a challenge, but I think it works pretty good. And then the last piece is pretty special. Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, with a special appearance by John Lennon and Yoko Ono. At the time, the Beatles had just broken up. This is 1971. Lennon was being trailed all over by a camera crew because there was some custody battle going on, and he, of course, was big news. But they didn't bring the crew to the Fillmore that night. Emily had her camera, and there's this amazing story about Yoko was not very pleased at by the performance. It goes on longer than this. Apparently, the guys in the band were kind of mimicking her a little bit, and she saw it, or she remembered it, and she called up Emily. Actually, John called up Emily because, we don't do all business, but maybe your person could talk to my person. We'd love to buy the film. And sure enough, Alan Klein, the notorious, in my opinion, the man who broke the Beatles up, he contacted Emily, this college student, and negotiated with her to buy the film. Emily went to the hotel they were staying at. I think they were at the Plaza, and she described to me that the room was just a shambles. There was was stuff everywhere, unmade beds, all that, and piles of these designer clothing like in corners and stacks of money. Anyway, she handed John the film, and 3 years later she got a call saying, "Do you have a copy of the film?" They lost the negative. Fortunately, she had made a dupe of that performance, so that's the only thing that survives. It's not as beautiful as the negative would have looked, but it is something, and it's a special performance. So I hope you enjoy that. And then following that, bit of TV history. There was a show that David Susskind hosted in the late 50s into the 60s called Open End. And the whole idea was the show ended when it ended. Imagine trying to do that today. So if Khrushchev was on and he was talking for 2 hours, they did not stop the show. And in fact, he was on. In fact, he did speak for 2 hours. We have a segment of a lost episode that was found just by chance. Some of the Susskind material is housed at the University of Wisconsin, and Jane Klain from the Paley Center, and a good friend of mine, was there looking for a different show. And she's a little bit of a thing. She's probably about 5'2". She's up on a ladder and looking at these 2-inch tapes that weigh about 40 pounds each, and she sees one with a ripped label. And I think it just says NG. She says, maybe this is the one that we're looking for. I forget what they were looking for, but they pull it down. It turned out to be probably the longest intact Martin Luther King interview ever. It was broadcast once and was lost forever until she happened to find it. We still are handling the Susskind archive. She sent it to us. We transferred it, and here's a portion of that legendary interview. It happened shortly after the Birmingham March. So Emily Rothschild and Open End. I'll be back. Next, and we have our final segment of 2 bits. Michael Shea was a photographer, worked for Time magazine and Life magazine, lived in Chicago, and he was very much influenced in the early 60s by the early films of D.A. Pennebaker and Ricky Leacock, who were doing films in Washington at the time. And a revolutionary new camera was developed. I think it was called the Auricon. And the Auricon was a 16 millimeter camera. You could have it on your shoulder and it recorded sound. This was a revelation. It isn't like today where you have a phone and you can make a feature film. I mean, it was complicated. And the fact that now you could actually record sound on this handheld camera opened up the world of cinema verite. And Shea was very much influenced, and he was obsessed with a particular neighborhood in Chicago, very much near the Loop. It was the oldest residential area in Chicago. It was called Maxwell Street. They had a market every Sunday from the 1880s when Eastern European settlers came in and had a regular open-air market. And through the years, it developed, and there were carnival people. There were people selling trinkets and snake oil and every type of music known to man, spiritualists. It was just this menagerie of crazy Americana, all in this one stretch of Chicago every Sunday. And by 1964, when Shea shot this, the city was getting sort of tired of what was going on down there. It was really getting a little bit out of hand. But it's this amazingly and sadly lost bit of Americana that Shea, over the course of about 16 Sundays, filmed. Michael Bloomberg, no, I'm sorry, what was it? Michael Bloom, guitarist. Yeah, there you go, thank you. Michael Bloomfield, 21 years old, and a rising musician. He went on to play with Dylan famously at Newport. He was the musical director, and he made it easy for Shea to get in there with his camera because Michael knew everybody that was performing, all these blues people, all these gospel people, all these sacred singers, and Shea was able to get in there, and over the course of these weeks, he filmed his only film. It was called And This Is Free, we acquired the negative from Shay's daughter, and it was in sad condition. There had been a really inferior video that came out maybe 20 years ago, but we got the negative, and again, sadly, a good part of it is deteriorated, not beyond repair. I think we can get some of the mavericks that I met today that maybe could help us with this, but I'm giving you a segment of this film that gives you an idea of Shay's work. It was 40 minutes long, 45 minutes long, and we have the last, say, 15 minutes of And This Is Free, followed by a project that I'm working on now with Robert Gordon, which is a film, a series, hopefully, that will encompass footage that was shot. We have 100 hours of it at the Newport Folk Festivals from 1963 to 66. So enjoy. Thank you so much for coming. I'm not sure if we have any time for questions. I'll leave that to Julia. But here is a bit from And This Is Free and my shameless self-promotion on our Newport project. Thank you. Thank you much. Not sure if anyone has any questions about anything that you saw. I'm happy to try to answer. Yes? Well, thank you. Emily, yeah. Yeah, she had a second camera person who totally messed it up. She told me she out of focus. He couldn't get the shot. All she wanted him to do was to get a master shot, like a, and and maybe go in and get a few close-ups here and there. So largely, it's her camera, but you could tell the difference. But yes, there was a second camera, and she edited some of the material together for that piece. Yes. Yeah, yeah. That was Emily. Emily shot that stuff, of course. Yeah. Yes. Well, the way Emily explained it to me is that the hotel room was such a shambles that she wasn't surprised that they totally lost. I mean, there were gangsters hanging out. It was a crazy time. And people were in and out. If they liked you, you were in. They didn't question who you were or what was going on. There were huge stars. There were people hanging on to them. And it's just no wonder that the negative was lost, never been found. So the way it goes is Yoko owns the copyright, but Emily has the print. So, it's 9/10 of the law, as they say. But, yes. Mhm. He shot 15 hours. And, the film was not received well because mainly people really wanted to shut the market down at that point. Wasn't received well, went in the closet, and very, very sadly, just in the course of moving and getting on, he died tragically. He died with his boots on. He was a cameraman, and he went down in a helicopter that hit a wire while he was filming. And the family had the stuff, and it's in a dump. Fortunately, the sound exists, and some of it did come out. But all that he shot, besides the A and B rolls that we got from his daughter, was just lost. An incredible record. I mean, I love this stuff because it's just life as it was back then. At a very different time. But to me, it's as important to try to preserve that as it is a great Hollywood work. I mean, I'm all about both, but to me, this type of material is just as important, and there's probably a lot more of it as well. He shot it in 1964 from August to December. We're at the beginning of it. We're shopping it around, as they say. It's a series, and we're very optimistic about it. We feel that we're going to be busy, very busy on this project this coming year. We're hoping anyway. Thank you. Okay. Yes, yes.
By the way, on the Newport, we had the luck a few years ago that Joe prepared a presentation just for us. It was mostly Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Yeah, it was just the Peter, Paul, and Mary material, 2 hours of it.
The footage is incredible. When we were raising, awareness for the cinema, that was one of the great screenings.
Thank you. Yeah, it is an amazing archive. It's like so many. Murray Lerner, Academy Award filmmaking, Mal to Mozart. But he only made a few films in his life, but he hid them like his children. No one could get near them. He was an overprotective father. It literally took me 15 years to finally pry that 100 hours of material loose from him. And it was because he was 90 and he knew I wasn't going away. And finally, one day he called me and goes, "All right, let's talk about buying the archive." So I went there and we were able to work it out. And and I've seen a lot of this stuff. There is no greater archive of Americana than that 100 hours that he shot. It's beyond the Peter, Paul, and Mary and the Bob Dylan. We all know about that. It's the Sacred Harp Singers. It's Bill Monroe singing with Doc Watson. It's Son House and all these people. And there's 12 John Hurt songs. I mean, and not 11 of them haven't been seen yet. So it's an amazing archive. I feel like I have quite an obligation to preserve it and to have people that want to see it. And that's what I'm determined to do. So.
Oh no, I was just kind of curious what form the that project is eventually going to take. Whether it's whether it's a single piece.
Well, we're hoping it to be a series, which would be a 4-part series. We're going to focus on each year with a sort of a wraparound at the end because the festival exists now still. It's the longest running festival of all time, really. George Wein, who just passed away. So, but if that is unable to happen, we'll have a very strong feature doc. Yeah, that's right. These are all kind of outtakes from a feature that he made in 1967 called Festival, which was a very verte, at the moment film that documented what was going on at Newport. Of course, in that 50, 60 years, there's so much significance socially and in music that we're going to tell a way more detailed story than Murray did. Murray presented some amazing moments, and it's a tremendous film. But where we're going with it is kind of the companion to Festival. Yeah. Yes.
I'll take the last one before the next show. Yesterday, when we, at the panel, I think we used the word archaeological explorations, for what you guys, there's a dimension to preservation of this. How do you seek out these materials? I mean, I think Joe, I don't know how many of you know, but Joe was the person that actually saved the Summer of Soul.
Don't get me started.
No, we were talking but how do you find this treasure? I mean, we could talk about Summer of Soul.
Well, with Summer of Soul, the Harlem Cultural Festival, I was visiting a colleague in Copenhagen. He was a film collector and he had a record label called Storyville. And he wanted to get rid of his prints. And we were just hanging around. I said, "What is this Harlem Festival?" He goes, "Oh, you haven't seen that?" I was amazed. He put it on, and it was Mahalia Jackson and the Staple Singers and B.B. King. I said, "Oh my God, I had never heard of it." And so I took the information on the film. When I got back to New York, it took me about 3 months. I finally tracked down Hal Tolchin, who was the original producer, and he had the material in his basement. And I courted him, and he told me the world needs to see this material. So my company signed a deal with him to really digitize it, organize it, and try to get a film made. So we were licensing clips, but Morgan Neville, who some of you may know, he went on to win an Academy Award, one of the great documentary and filmmakers now. Morgan Neville and Robert Gordon and I put together a a 12-minute trailer to try to get the film financed. And well, one thing led to another. And the producer who we went to that was going to finance the film kind of like screwed the deal up, and he left the company he was working for, signed Hal Tolchin, and spent the next 10 years trying to get the film made. We had $1 million on the table to make it, but anyway. And unfortunately, he took all the credit for it, and that's not the case. If it wasn't for me digging out Hal Tolchin and climbing into his basement and pulling out these tapes, which he took credit for, none of this would have happened. And it's sad that there is a documentary out there now touting itself on justice and righteousness, and the whole premise that the producers chose is a lie. Also, the fact that it was never seen, it was shown around the world in 1969. I have anyway, but how you find these things is perseverance. You check the old TV guides for shows that were on, and where are they, and you go to families, because sometimes the shows are owned by networks for television, but many times the families or the producer own them, and that's where we find a lot of the material. And with film, people call me at this point. I've been at it for a while, or you get a lead on something, and there's a lot of material. It's overwhelming, and the whole preservation thing, we are so scratching the surface of what to preserve. You think film preservation is fragile. Think about 2-inch video, thin magnetic tape. It's going to be gone. I mean, this film from 110 years ago, you could play, but videotape, 10 years, forget it. Goodbye. Anyway, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.